Hi there. In this video tutorial we will talk about how to add some secondary character motion to our first person point of view character action in Unreal. So the last video we came in here and we created some basic character movement, WASD to move around, spacebar to jump, and the mouse to look around properly. So those are basic actions that most games are going to need. In this video I'm going to talk about how to create some secondary actions for more specific purposes. Not that every game is going to need all of these, but these are some other little smaller, quicker interactions that we can add to change the way the player can move around the environment or interact with the environment. So the first one we're going to create is going to be called a crouch. And just like we did for player motions, we're going to start by going to the project settings. So we go to settings, project settings, and add in a crouch input. So if we go underneath engine, select input, and this is going to be an action mapping. So our player mapping or axis mappings are going to be our basic actions, and then we're going to go into action mappings as far as basic movement actions and camera actions. And then action mappings are going to be when I press a different key to adjust, refine, or add to the basic axis mapping. So let's do action mappings plus. And we're going to call this one crouch. And then we're going to add a key to it. You can add whatever key you want. I'm going to use C for crouch. Okay, there you go. And we're going to close it out. Alright, so in our player blueprint, the character player blueprint, I'm going to open this up, and we're going to add the action here as an event. But before we do that, we want to allow the player to be able to crouch. So let's go to the character movement node in the components. And let's see if we can easily find it. Okay, we'll just search for it up at the top. So what we're looking for is can crouch. Okay, so in order to allow the character to crouch, we have to checkbox can crouch. This is under navigational movement capabilities, can crouch. So I want to make sure that we can crouch, and then there's the crouch half height of the character that we can change and adjust. But overall, we want to, with the character movement, turn on can crouch. All right, so now we're going to add our action. And the action is going to be that crouch action. So let's do crouch, and we're going to go find our action events crouch. There we go. Zoom in so we can see that. So basically this is a press to versus a release command or action, which basically means when we press this button down, we want to crouch. And when we, for crouch, we can either have it when we release that button that uncrouches, or we could have it when I press that crouch button, it stays crouched until I press crouch button again. It's just an option. So I'll show both of them here. When I do press crouch, I'm going to drag out from that, from that action or that event. And then there is a crouch function. So if I type in crouch and add that, pretty simple there. And then when I do released, when crouch button, C button is released, then there is an uncrouch button. There you go. And in essence, that's really it. That's all I really need. Let's do compile, let's do save, and let's go test it out. So but the key thing is underneath character movement, we have to, let's see, let's go to crouch again. We have to make sure can crouch is turned on. Now also in this, there's also a max walk speed for crouch. Let's decrease that some so that we can walk slower when crouched. So let's do max walk speed of 150. The max walk speed in general is 600, so I definitely want to decrease the max walk speed while crouching. I just lowered it even more to 150. So let's compile and save again. And let's go play. Alright, so now I still have my regular movement, WSD, arrow to move around, jump. But if I press the C key, See how it pops me down? And I just hit the C key and let go, I will uncrouch. But I'll hold down C, and then if I use WASD, I'm crouched. I'll get me close to these objects so you can see. So there's my regular height. I'll hold down C, I'm crouched, and I can move around. You can see my movement's a lot slower. If I let go of C, it uncrouches, and then my movement speed is back to normal. So it depends on what kind of game that you want to set up. If I hold down C, if I let go, it goes out of crouch. But I'm also going to show you the other way, which is a flip-flop toggle. So back in our event graph, instead of released goes to uncrouch, I just want to press. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and remove the connection from released. And I'll move both of these over. And I'm also going to hold down the Alt key and remove it from pressed as well. I'm going to drag out from pressed, and I want to choose a flip-flop button. So basically when I press the C key once, I want it to crouch. When I press the C key again, I want it to uncrouch. But just tapping the C key will go into crouch mode, and then tapping the C key again will go out of crouch mode. So let's do flip-flop. Flip-flop. And this is a switch. So basically when the first time I press it, A is going to happen. The second time I press it, B is going to happen. So I want to press into flip-flop, and then I want to drag from the A executable to crouch, drag from the B executable to uncrouch. So let's compile and save. And we'll close this out. So this is a variation, whereas I can still move around. But what's different now, when I tap C and let go of it, I'm in crouch mode, and I'm just crouching. And then if I tap C again, I'm out of crouch mode. So in crouch mode, out of crouch mode. So hopefully you can see how fast the ground is moving when I'm in crouching versus not. So that way it's a toggle on and off. Just an option, a variation of the original. That was with the flip-flop command. Alright, so my crouch is done. So what I'm going to do is drag select and hit C for comment, and we'll call this one crouch. Move it over here so it's close to the other one. So let's compile and save. Now we have the availability to crouch when the player would like to get lower in things or walk slower, kind of creep along. So we have a couple other commands we can add. We can add like a run or a sprint. So that'll be the next one we're going to create. Let's go back and we're going to add an action mapping again. So settings, project settings, inputs, and let's add another action mapping. And we're going to call this one sprint. Okay, you call it run. Technically the character's already running, or walking rather fast. So we're going to add a sprint, and then we'll use the left shift key. So we'll say shift, and then we'll type in left shift. So I'm also going to add a slow walk as well. So let's go ahead and add one called slow walk. I don't want to just call this walk because the walk command in the character movement just calls it walk. So we'll call it a slow walk and a sprint. So for the slow walk, let's add the V key just right beside crouch. Keyboard V key. So sprint action mapping, left shift, slow walk, V. You can change those to whatever you might want. Alright, so for sprint we got to set this up, and it's a little more complex of a graph, but it'll still work, and we can do it without a lot of complexity to it. So we're going to type in sprint here, and there's our action mapping for sprint. Okay. Alright, so we need to get a reference to our character movement, because what we need to do is actually reference how fast the character is actually walking, and then increase that speed with a couple new variables. So we're going to take our character movement node and drag this into the graph. So basically the character movement node from the components, going to drag that into the graph. Okay, I'll put that down here. Alright, so we're going to drag out from character movement, and we're going to get a max walk speed. We need to get a reference to the character movement's max walk speed. There you go. So there's that. Oh, sorry, we need to set max walk speed, not get. So we'll do set max walk speed. Looks a little weird to me. Set max walk speed. There we go. All right. And what we're going to do is duplicate the set max walk speed down here. And we're going to connect up the character movement to that target as well. Okay. All right, and then we're going to connect pressed to the top one and released to the bottom one. There we go. So that way when I press the sprint button, which is the shift key, it's going to increase the sprint or the max walk speed. And when I release, it's going to go back to the original max walk speed. Now we can easily set this and change this with a couple of new variables. So in the My Blueprint tab over here, I'm going to click on the plus symbol for variables and add 2 new variables. We're going to add one called run, and this is going to be a float, so it's as default as a boolean. So over in the details panel, boolean is a dark red. So variable type, we're going to change that to float, which is a value. And then let's create a new variable. One more variable, and we're going to call this one sprint. There you go. All right, sprint and run variable. I need to compile and save. And then once I do that, compile and save, it's going to give me a default value. So my default walk, or rather run speed, max walk speed is 600. So I want to set that for run. I'm going to go back to my run variable I just created and change my default run to 600. And then my default sprint, I need that to be higher than that. I'm just going to double that, so we'll do 1200 for default value for sprint. You may change that to lower or higher, but I wanted to show you visibly, you'll see the difference at 1200, twice the run speed. And we'll compile and save again. And then what we need to do is get that run and sprint value and plug that into the max walk speed when we press versus when we release. So the first one's going to be a get a sprint, and we're going to drag that variable from the My Blueprint section over here, and then we're going to choose get. So we'll move this over here, maybe move these down a little bit. And the sprint value, which is default as 1200, is going to get funneled into the pressed max walk speed. So what that means is when I press my sprint button, the shift key is going to increase my max walk speed to 1200. When I release it, I'm going to drag from run into the graph and choose get run. And when I release the sprint button, it's going to go back to the default max walk speed of 600. All right, let's compile and save and go test it out. All right, let's play. All right, so I can walk around, I can still jump and everything. If I hold down shift, let me get so you can see something else. If I hold down shift, I can run faster. I'm holding down shift while moving now. So when I let go of shift, I can move naturally. If I hold down shift, I'm twice as fast now. So now we have a sprint, or really a run command. Okay. So shift will move faster in all directions. Whereas if I let go of shift, that's my natural movement right there. This will also work with the rest of our commands as well. So if I hold down shift and jump while hold down shift, it will jump faster as well. All right, so there is sprint. Let's drag select on our nodes for sprint and hit C for comment, and we'll call this one sprint. Okay, we'll move it over here. Maybe scale it out to match that one. There you go. Compile and save. All right, let's do the opposite. Let's do a slow walk. So we have our slow walk action input. I'm going to right click and then we'll type in slow walk action event. There you go. All right, so this one will be a very similar action as we did for our sprint. We're going to get our character movement again. Drag that in. And then from character movement, we're going to do set max walk speed. There you go. That will be connected to our pressed. And then we're going to duplicate that again. and this is going to be connected to release. So for this one, we're going to use run again. So let's drag in our run and use get run. And that's going to get connected to release. So we want to go back to our default run. But we need a new variable to slow down, just like we had a variable to speed up. So let's hit the plus symbol for variables, and we will do slow walk. And the variable type, we're going to change that to float. Let's compile. Let's see, may depend on the node. Oh, yep, we need the character movement attached to the target here. There we go, compile and save. And then with our slow walk, now we have a default. And let's just set this to 100 so we can see this. So our slow walk may be a little too slow, but we'll test it out here. So compile and save to give us our default value and change it to 100. And then now we can drag in our slow walk, get slow walk, and drag that to the pressed max walk speed. Let's compile and save. And let's go play. Alright, so I can walk around normally. And I think V was the key here. So let's do V. If I hold down V while moving, it's much slower. If I let go of V, it's regular. There's holding down V, it's much slower. Let go of V. Okay. Hold down sprint. Hold down V. Oh, that's C. Hold down V. There you go. Alright, so that's working properly. But maybe I want, instead, I'll show you the variation as well with the flip-flop. So let's move this over. Instead of the released and press go to straight in, I want to do a flip-flop. So basically, when I tap V, I want to go into slow down walk mode. So just another variation. I'm going to click and drag out from pressed, and we'll do another flip-flop. Align it up, and then we'll add A. So when pressed the first time, it goes into slow walk. When pressed V the second time, out of B, that goes back to a regular walk, a regular run. Let's compile and save. So that flip-flop allows us to be able to have a toggle. Back again. So if I, let's say regular walk, if I tap V, now I'm in slow walk, and I'm not holding down V anymore. If I tap V again, I can go back out of slow walk. So there's V on for slow walk, off, on, and off. There you go. So that's the way to kind of slow down and speed up the walk. We'll hold down sprint, or let go of sprint, shift key. And then if I hold or tap V, that's a toggle to go into slow down mode or walk mode. Now it's not changing how fast everything else is moving. This is just changing how fast the player is moving. Alright, one last thing we can add to wrap up this video is kind of like a jetpack action. And what we're going to be really doing is propelling our character up in the air whenever we press a button. Okay, so we're actually going to use a launch command. So let's go back to the settings and project settings. We need to add an action mapping for our jetpack action. So new action mapping, and we'll just call this one jetpack. You call it propulsion or whatever, we're just going to call it jetpack. And let's use the Z key for this. Is that what I did? Z key. Let's try Alt. Try Alt key. That'll work. Another specific command. Left Alt. You can also do Z or whatever else you might want to. Jetpack Alt. Left Alt. All right. So let's go back into our player blueprint. We need to comment our slow walk. So let's comment our slow walk. C slow walk. Go. And let's go underneath that. And we're going to, let's do compile and save. Underneath that, we're going to do jetpack. Jetpack action event. There we go. All right, this one is pretty simple. It's very similar to jump. There's a launch function. And when I drag out of pressed, I'm going to find launch. L-A-U-N-C-H. Launch character. All right, add launch character. There you go. All right, now what we have to do here is change the launch velocity. Which axis do I want to launch the character in? So what I can do here is the X is horizontal, Y, and then Z. So I'm going to change the z-axis because in Unreal, the z-axis is the vertical axis. X and Y are horizontal. So let's propel my character vertically. Let's try 500. So 500 units above will propel my character vertically. Alright, that's really it. Let's go ahead and comment this out. So let's drag select and do comment, and then we'll call this one Jetpack. Jetpack action. Here we go. Compile and save. We want to do one more thing that we can do. Let's hit play and I'll show you why. So if I hit play and I can jump, but if I hit the Alt key, I'm propelling myself up in the air as well. And if I keep hitting the Alt key, it's now like a jetpack that adds every time I press the Alt key to propel myself up in the air further. Now there is a little bit of in-air movement change or air control, but it's really not a lot. So I can go in and change the air movement control to make my adjustment for how far I can move my character around while in air. So let's go back into our character blueprint. Here's character movement. And I'm going to search for air control. Let's see if we can, there it is. Under character movement, jumping, falling. Air control is really low at 0.05. Let's change that to 0.2. We don't want to go too crazy, but 0.2 air control. And we'll compile and save. And then we'll get out and hit play. So I can still move around, I can still jump. But if I hit the Alt key, now I can propel myself up like I'm flying in a jetpack. If I'm in the air, I have a little bit more control over what I'm doing in the air here. Move around, I can stop my motion from moving in that direction. So that's a quick adjustment to the character movement for in-air control. Alright, so I could also do the opposite. I can have a dash action as well. So when I have a button press for dash, I can dash forward, but we already kind of have a sprint that does something similar. But I can dash horizontally in the X or Y axis as well. With a launch character in the X or Y axis, it would really be the X. But those are some major actions that we can add to improve or add secondary interactions to the player movement. So we added a crouch motion. Here's our crouch. We added sprint. We added a slow walk, and then a jetpack. So it's good to comment out everything to keep everything organized in your event graph for your player character. Let's go see if we can practice with all of these. So here's our basic movement. WASD, spacebar to jump, mouse to look around. What was the first one we did? We did crouch. So if I tap C, now I'm in crouch mode, and I can still walk around, but it's rather slow. Should allow me to get underneath these things. There you go. And if I get out of crouch, hit C again. Now I can't get under those cubes. The next one was sprint. So if I hold down shift while moving around, I'm moving around faster. There's without sprint, shift held down. There's with shift held down. So it's like a dash or sprint. And then what do we use for walk? With V? I think it was a V key, right? Here we go. So if I tap V, that's a toggle. And I'm walking slowly. If I toggle V again, now I can walk back normally. Slow with V down or V pressed. And then V pressed again for back to normal. And then the last one was a jetpack, which was the Alt key. So if I tap Alt, I can propel myself up in the air. Guide around a little bit with the air control. So all those actions can work on top of one another. So there's some additional interactions, player movement that we can add for specific types of games, for specific types of motion. That'll wrap up this video on some additional player movement commands.